Our film begins in a small village with a little girl named Heidi. Her father and mother are dead, and she lives with her young aunt Deet, but Deet gets a job far from the village, and she is not allowed to take Heidi with her. And since they have no other relatives except the grandfather, Deet is forced to go to him. The grandfather lives in an isolated place at the top of the mountain, and he has a very bad reputation. None of the villagers like him. He is very harsh and violent, and even his relationship with his late son was not good. But Deet is forced to leave Heidi with him. Deet and Heidi arrive at the grandfather's house, but he does not welcome them and refuses to take Heidi, kicking them out of his farm. However, Deet puts the grandfather in front of a fait accompli and leaves Heidi in front of the house, telling her not to be afraid because her grandfather won't harm her. Then she leaves. The grandfather gets very upset and tells Heidi to go after her aunt, but Heidi answers innocently that her aunt doesn't want her. So the grandfather gets angry, leaves Heidi alone, enters his house, and closes the door behind him. Heidi keeps calling out to him until she gets tired, then decides to sleep in the barn with the animals. The next day, the grandfather enters the barn and gives Heidi some milk to drink. Then he takes her to the city priest and tells him to find someone to adopt her because he doesn't want her. But the priest pities her, sees that she is beautiful and healthy, and tells the grandfather that he will search for a farmer family to take her in. Meanwhile, she must stay with him, and he reminds him that it is his religious duty to care for his only granddaughter. The grandfather is forced to take her back home. There, Heidi asks him if she will sleep in the barn again. He tells her she can sleep wherever she wants. Heidi enters the house and finds only one chair and a bed. Then she sees a small ladder, climbs it, and finds only straw. She asks her grandfather to let her sleep on the straw, and he agrees. So she goes down and hugs him. Later, a boy named Peter arrives. He is responsible for herding the goats. He tells the grandfather to let her come with him to the mountains and take a break from her. Heidi goes with Peter while he herds the goats. On the first day, Heidi is very happy. She plays with the sheep and sees the mountain scenes and nature, and she is very happy. Peter takes advantage of the fact that she is not paying attention and steals the food from her bag and eats it. When Heidi comes back and doesn't find her food, she smiles and asks if he ate it. Peter denies it at first, then says maybe a goat ate it. Later, Peter sees two goats fighting and hits them with his stick, but Heidi stops him and tells him not to do that. Peter tells her that when they fight, their milk decreases. Heidi tells him that she will give him half of her food every day if he doesn't hit the goats, and she makes him promise. Peter promises her, feeling very happy that he'll get to eat delicious food every day. Heidi and Peter continue spending time together every day. Peter shows her strange animals and plants she has never seen before. She is very happy playing and enjoying the freedom she feels. Peter is also happy as he finally found someone to spend time with. They become very close friends. One day, Heidi wakes up to find that her grandfather will take her to the priest so someone can adopt her. Peter becomes very upset and feels sad that he will be alone again. Heidi starts getting closer to her grandfather, and because of her tenderness, his love for her starts to show. The next day, Heidi gathers her things and decides to sleep in the barn again. Her grandfather asks if Peter told her anything about him. Heidi can't answer. Then the grandfather tells her that everything said about him is just rumors, and that it's up to her to decide whether to believe what she hears or what she sees. Heidi is touched by his words and decides to sleep in the house. She hugs her grandfather before sleeping and begins to grow more attached to him day by day. One day, Heidi returns from the mountain and finds that her grandfather made an extra chair in the house. She smiles and asks innocently if the chair is for her. He tells her that there is no one else but her. Heidi realizes that her grandfather has decided she will stay with him. She becomes very happy, jumps into his arms, and kisses him. One day, Peter tells her that he won't be able to come again until spring because he will go to school. Heidi asks her grandfather if she can go to school too, but he refuses because the distance is too far. Winter comes, and Heidi is unable to enjoy her time, especially after Peter leaves. So her grandfather makes her a sled, and they continue spending time together sledding on the snow. Heidi becomes very happy. Her grandfather takes her to Peter's house, and when they see each other, they hug tightly and are very happy. From then on, her grandfather takes her to Peter every day using the sled, and carries her back on his back because she can't walk on the snow. Deet returns from the city, having found a place for Heidi. She goes to the grandfather, but he gets angry with her and tells her to leave. So Deet waits for Heidi at a distance from the house until she returns. As soon as Heidi sees her, she hugs her and tells her that she found a big house where the owners want a little girl to be a companion for their daughter. She tells Heidi that she'll be able to study and live a better life, but Heidi replies that she's happy here and doesn't want to leave her grandfather. Deet insists, telling her that her grandfather doesn't want her and that he agreed she could leave. Heidi becomes sad, believes her aunt, and decides to go with her, her eyes filled with sorrow. They board the train together. Heidi stands at the back of the last carriage, looking at the mountains, saying goodbye to her grandfather's home for the last time. Peter returns alone to the grandfather's house. He asks him about Heidi, and the grandfather realizes that her aunt took her without his knowledge. He runs madly through the village streets, searching for Heidi, but the villagers mock him when they see him. They speak loudly and scornfully, wondering how Heidi could live with a man like him. The grandfather realizes he is too late and that Heidi has already left. He returns home, filled with sadness and a deep sense of loss. Meanwhile, Deet and Heidi arrive at the mansion where she is to live. They are greeted by the housekeeper, who is shocked at the sight of Heidi. She is dressed in boys' clothes, her hair is cut short like a boy's, and she isn't even wearing shoes. The housekeeper then steps outside with Heidi's aunt, clearly upset, and tells her that Heidi is not suitable for their household. Dee replies that Heidi was specifically requested by the master of the house and demands her share of the deal. She's effectively trading her niece for money. Dee leaves, telling Heidi quietly that she can come back home anytime she wants. The daughter of the house is ill, and her father and grandmother had asked for a girl to be her friend and stay with her since Klara is a paralyzed child. Later, it's time for lunch. The housekeeper, Klara, and Heidi sit at the dining table. The housekeeper begins explaining the house rules to Heidi. Running, jumping, loud voices, or any movement around the house are strictly forbidden, and she tells her that it's not appropriate to speak to the servants using polite terms like sir or ma'am, and that she should only deal with them by giving orders. Heidi gets annoyed by the housekeeper's lengthy talk to the point that she falls asleep from boredom. The next day, Heidi wakes up in time for breakfast, but she doesn't know how to eat with a spoon or use any of the utensils at the table. She drinks from the bowl and eats with her hands, which angers the housekeeper, who tells her to use a spoon. Klara tries to teach her how to eat properly and calmly. After that, they walk together through the mansion, with Heidi pushing Klara's wheelchair. They go to the room of Klara's father, where there's a picture of Klara with her mother. In the picture, Klara is standing on her feet. Heidi smiles and asks how she was able to stand. Klara tells her that after her mother died, she got an illness that made her unable to move because of her deep sadness. She tells Heidi that she misses her mother very much and begins to cry. During one of the lessons, Heidi innocently says that her friend Peter told her education is pointless and that they won't gain anything from it. This angers the teacher greatly, and he complains about her, suggesting that a different teacher should be assigned to her. However, the housekeeper shouts at him and accuses him of being unable to teach a little girl a few letters, so the teacher is forced to continue teaching Heidi until she reaches Klara's level. Heidi was a free-spirited girl, used to running, jumping, and mountain life. Every time she entered a new room in the mansion, she tried to open the window to see the mountains and her grandfather's house, but the windows were very strong, and she couldn't move them. One day, Heidi asks the head servant, whose name is Sebastian, to open the window for her. He is a very kind man and is happy with the way Heidi treats him, with simplicity and humility. He brings her a chair to stand on, and Heidi looks out the window but sees nothing but many houses. Sebastian tells her that she needs to go to a higher place to be able to see everything. He points to a distant church and tells her that if she climbs to the top floor, she will be able to see the mountain. Heidi becomes excited and decides to go. The next day, she goes out with Klara, and they walk together through the city's markets. Eventually, they reach the church. Heidi has to leave Klara at the door since she will be climbing the stairs. Klara tells her she'll wait for her. Heidi climbs to the highest point in the church tower, but she still can't see the mountains. She begins calling out for her grandfather, feeling very sad and longing for her home and him. At that moment, the housekeeper enters Klara's room thinking she is asleep, but is shocked to find that she's not there. She sends the servants to search the entire mansion, but they can't find her. Sebastian then decides to go out and look for them himself. Meanwhile, Heidi comes down from the church, still sad that she couldn't see her grandfather or the mountains. On their way back home, they meet Sebastian, who goes back with them to the house. The housekeeper shouted at Heidi and blamed her for everything. Klara tried to defend her, but the housekeeper told Klara not to interfere in raising children. Then she decided to punish Heidi by depriving her of food and forcing her to stand facing the wall. Heidi felt deeply upset. She decided to take off her dress, put on her old clothes, pack her belongings, and return to her grandfather. As she was saying goodbye to Klara, the housekeeper saw her and asked where she was going. Heidi calmly replied that she was going to her grandfather, but the housekeeper told her she wouldn't go anywhere and threw her bag on the floor. Heidi told her that her aunt had said she could go back home anytime, but the housekeeper responded that her aunt was lying to her and that she would never leave this house. Klara saw Heidi, who was determined to leave and abandon her, and she became very upset and cried. Heidi was affected too and decided to stay for Klara's sake. But Klara's sadness grew worse, and she felt that no one around her loved her, especially since her father was always traveling and never spent time with her. Heidi went to her room, apologized to Klara, and promised not to leave. Klara was happy and told her they would enjoy their time together. Finally, Klara's father and grandmother returned from their trip. They were very kind and welcomed Heidi warmly. However, the housekeeper complained about her, saying Heidi wasn't suitable for Klara. She said Heidi couldn't read or even pronounce letters properly, and that she was used to living in the wild with animals, and thus couldn't adapt to living in such a refined place. The grandmother tells him to judge Heidi for himself. That night, she visits Heidi before bed and tells her a story about shepherds and the wildlife that Heidi once lived, but she only tells half the story. When Heidi begs her to finish it, the grandmother says that if Heidi learns to read, she'll be able to discover the ending on her own, thus encouraging her to learn reading in a subtle way. Heidi stays up all night trying to read the words, and in the morning, she continues practicing until she can pronounce all the letters and words correctly. She attends class with Klara, and the teacher is very impressed by her progress. He invites the whole family to watch, and when she finishes reading, they applaud and encourage her. Days go by, and the grandmother prepares to return to her home. Before she leaves, she tells her son that Heidi carries deep sadness within her, as she misses her home and her grandfather. However, the father sees how happy Klara is with Heidi around, so he decides to ignore Heidi's sadness for the sake of his daughter's joy. One night, a maid hears the palace door creak open on its own. Terrified, she calls for the housekeeper and the butler, who are also very frightened. The next day, they inform Klara's father about what happened. He doesn't believe their ghost story and insists that ghosts aren't real, but he asks the doctor to stay up with him that night just to be sure. That night, they indeed hear the door creaking open. They quietly grab their pistols and go downstairs to investigate, only to suddenly find Heidi. The doctor realizes that Heidi has been sleepwalking. He waits until Heidi returns to her room and lies down on the bed. Then he wakes up and asks her about the dream she was having. Heidi tells him that she was dreaming about her grandfather, and he realizes that she misses her home and is suffering because of being away from her family and land. The doctor goes to speak with Klara's father, informing him that Heidi is sick and suffering from homesickness. He warns him that her condition will only worsen if she stays away from her home. However, Klara's father objects to her leaving because his daughter is happy with Heidi around. Still, the doctor insists on his opinion, then leaves. The father stays up all night, thinking about what his mother and the doctor said. In the end, he decides to let Heidi return home. He sits with Klara to tell her about Heidi's condition and that she must return to her home. Klara becomes very upset, breaks things around her, and when she sees Heidi, she tells her angrily to go back to her grandfather and never come back again. Then she orders her maid to escort Heidi out of the room. The father speaks with Heidi and tells her she can go back home. Heidi becomes very happy, but then she remembers Klara. She goes to say goodbye, knocking on Klara's door, but Klara refuses to say farewell. Heidi travels with the head servant who takes her all the way to her village, then leaves. The villagers are overjoyed when they see her, dressed in new clothes and looking beautiful. Heidi goes to Peter, and the moment she sees him, she hugs him. Then she runs quickly toward the mountains to reach her grandfather. Along the way, she takes off the dress that she felt imprisoned her and feels free as she runs through the wide open fields, calling out to her grandfather at the top of her voice. Her grandfather hears her voice, hardly believing his ears. He runs to her, tears of joy streaming down his face, and they embrace each other. Heidi returns to her old life with her grandfather and Peter, full of happiness once again. One day, Heidi wrote a letter to Klara, asking her to come visit. At Klara's house, her grandmother was reading Heidi's letters, while Klara was very sad and had been feeling unwell ever since Heidi left. So, her grandmother decided to take Klara to visit Heidi at her home. When they arrived, Heidi couldn't believe that Klara was going to stay with her. She was overjoyed and began preparing everything happily. Heidi's grandfather sat with Klara's grandmother, who asked him to take care of Klara and told him she would leave her there for a few days. He agreed and took full responsibility, even carrying Klara up and down from Heidi's room on the upper floor. Every night, Heidi and Klara slept side by side. They spent their days happily, playing and enjoying their time together. However, Peter became very upset and jealous of Klara, who had taken his only friend and distracted her from him. One day, Peter decided to destroy Klara's wheelchair to get back at her. He pushed it off the hill and ran away. The next morning, they couldn't find Klara's wheelchair and searched everywhere. The grandfather eventually found out that Peter was behind it, so he decided to carry Klara all the way to where Peter was herding the goats. He told Peter that he knew what he had done and asked him to look after the two girls, then walked away. For the first time, Klara saw the mountains that Heidi had always talked about and the beautiful life she had always longed to return to. She finally understood why Heidi missed her home so much. Heidi went to pick some berries for Klara, and suddenly Klara felt something like a tickle in her legs. It was a strange sensation, as she was supposed to be paralyzed. She tried to move her toes, leaned on a nearby rock, and to her surprise, she managed to stand up. Heidi saw her from a distance and was overwhelmed with joy. She ran quickly toward her, and Peter came running too to help her walk. They spent the whole day helping Klara stand and walk on her own. Meanwhile, Klara's father found out that her grandmother had taken her to the village. He arrived there angry and asked about his daughter. Suddenly, he heard her voice from afar. He turned around and saw her standing and walking toward him. Neither the father nor the grandmother could believe that Klara was able to walk again. They cried with joy as Klara walked to them on her own. Her father and grandmother thanked Heidi for everything she had done and prayed for her. Klara returned to her normal life after Heidi's love brought happiness back into her heart following her mother's death. As for Heidi, she continued living with her grandfather in the village. She went to school and decided she wanted to become a writer. Her first book was the story of her own life. If you finish this summary, don't forget to like and subscribe to encourage us to keep going.